Like literally, I have no money in my bank account, or I have overdrafted my bank account, kind of broke. Hi friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you're new here, my name is Lexa, and today we are answering the question, how do I budget when I literally have no money? In today's video, I'm going to be referencing YNAB a lot. It stands for You Need a Budget. It is my favorite budgeting software, and the reason that I am referencing YNAB is because I love this system and how it's set up and think it is so helpful for people who are living paycheck to paycheck, have overdrafted their account, or have no money. But just keep in mind, all of these tips can still be used even if you don't use YNAB or you have a different budgeting system. I just 12 out of 10 recommend using YNAB if you are in a position where you are trying to budget when you actually have absolutely no money to your name. Because I know on here I've done tons of videos on saving money, paying off debt, investing, and I try to come up with video concepts and use examples that is going to appeal to a wide range of people. But I know that when you are in a position where you've overdrafted all of your accounts or you have like less than $5 until payday, it feels like there's no way that you could implement any of these tips. So I want to walk you through exactly what that looks like and how you actually can create a budget and hopefully set yourself up for success and put yourself in a place where you can get out of that cycle. So let's go ahead and get into it. Step number one is to make a plan, because even if you have no money, you can at least plan for your expenses and what you're going to do whenever you get paid again. And lucky for us, planning is actually a big and crucial step inside of YNAB. We want to set up a budget that reflects your reality right now. So we are going to go through and write out all of your fixed expenses, variable expenses, savings goals, and debt payoff goals. Don't worry right now if you can't afford all of these. We'll get to that here in a little bit. So in order to do this, I like to call this like step 1A or step 1.2, is that you need to analyze your past spending to see how much you are spending on things like gas, groceries, eating out, fun money, all of these variable expenses that a lot of times people ask me, how am I supposed to budget for these? How do I go about creating targets? This is how you're gonna do it. You wanna look at what have you been spending in these categories in the past. I like to do this by just printing out your bank statements from the last like 2 or 3 months. Also include anywhere your money is coming in and out of. Venmo, your credit cards, savings accounts, and start documenting all of your fixed expenses, your debt payments, and go through and start estimating how much you're spending on those variable expenses. Now, our step 1B or step 1.3 is going to be assigning every category a target. Once you have made a budget outline of all of your expenses, debt, and savings goals, you want to assign a target to every single category. This is especially true if you are working with YNAB. If you have questions about targets, which actually they used to be called goals, I do have a video on YNAB goals. It's the same thing, they just call them something different now. And I have step-by-step tutorials of setting up a budget inside of your YNAB account, both of which I will link up here and also in the description box down below. But the most important part here is that we are assigning a target to every category. This is basically how much do we plan on spending on that expense, or how much does that bill or debt payment actually cost? Again, don't worry about whether you have enough money inside of your account to cover this right now. We are just making a plan. Step number 2 is to analyze your budget versus your lifestyle versus your income. The first thing that I would do is check out the total monthly goals button over to the side of your YNAB budget. What this number is telling you is that with all of your targets taken into consideration, this is how much you would need to make on a month-to-month basis in order to cover all of your expenses. So you need to ask yourself, is this realistic? Is this number way more or way less than you actually take in? And even if you don't know exactly how much you make on a month-to-month basis, do something similar to what we did with our variable expenses. Go back over the last few months and look at what was the average amount that you took in on a month-to-month basis. Because I know not a lot of us work a salary job and know exactly how much we're gonna make, but that'll give you kind of a good estimate of how much money that you're bringing in. If it is close to that number, you're good to go. You can move on to step 3. If you are like most people and the number of your target goals inside of your YNAB budget is way more than you actually make, you're gonna have to start looking at ways that you can cut back in a realistic way. So speaking of which, step 2A is going to be looking at where you can cut back. The first place that I always tell people to check is their variable spending. Is there anywhere that you can start cutting back in a way that is realistic? What we don't want to happen is for you to start cutting back on your variable expenses, pretending like you're gonna spend $100 a month on groceries when right now you spend $500, because that's not going to be realistic. You're gonna end up overspending, or you're gonna end up spending money in other categories, probably like eating out, to offset the fact that you're spending way less on groceries, which means you're probably buying groceries you're not going to eat, or you're not buying enough groceries. So while you're looking at your variable expenses, just be realistic. Try cutting back a little bit at a time in multiple categories rather than trying to slash one category in half. Another place you might have to look is at your savings goals. Be realistic about these. It might be ideal for you to set aside $150 toward a new car every month, but if that's just not realistic right now, that might be a goal that you just have to wait a little bit longer to start putting more money toward. Again, this is a balancing act between being realistic with what your life is like right now and also being realistic with what your income is like right now. And finally, once you've taken a look at your variable expenses and your savings goals, if you still need to cut back, start looking at your necessary expenses. Now, I'm not telling you to like cut out things like a phone bill when you need a phone, but just because it's a necessary expense doesn't mean that there aren't ways for you to figure out how to cut back on that expense. One of my favorite things that I did recently was switching from T-Mobile to Mint. They run off of the same network. I've had an amazing experience, but with Mint, we were actually able to cut our phone bill in half. Now we pay $30 a person a month, whereas before on T-Mobile, we paid $120 a month for both of us, or basically $60 a month per phone line. That $30 a month could be huge for you, and Mint is even cheaper if you don't use as much data. We opted for the unlimited option because I use a lot of data on the go in Google Maps and driving around. But if you're not someone who uses a lot of data and you can rely a lot on Wi-Fi, you can actually get that down to like $10, $15, or $20 a month. With my link, you'll also get an extra $15 to put toward your phone bill if you decide to switch to Mint, so I will link that down below. But of course, there are other options to cutting back on necessary expenses, like finding ways to reduce your electric bill, bundling with friends. This is an awesome option, whether that's your phone bill or your Spotify or Netflix. A lot of times, family plans are a lot cheaper per person, and if you have friends or family you can get on plans with, that's going to help you save a lot of money. You also want to go through and ask yourself if all of those necessary expenses are really needs. Because sometimes what we consider to be a necessary expense, when we take a look at our life, we realize that we don't actually need to be spending money on that thing. And of course, whenever you get your budget under control and you either increase your income or find other ways to cut back, you can reincorporate that expense if you want, if it's a nice little luxury to make your life a little bit easier. But for now, we are just trying to cut back in a way that gets you out of that overdraft cycle. Now, if you are someone who is taking a look at your total monthly goals inside of your YNAB budget and you realize that they're actually a lot less than what you are making on a month-to-month basis, let's go over what you can do in step 2B. The first thing I recommend is to make sure that you actually have included all of your expenses. Did you include all of those annual fees, all of your fixed monthly expenses like your bills? Did you include things like gas? Were you realistic with groceries? Because if you have been living paycheck to paycheck and overdrafting your accounts, somewhere you are spending more than you are making. So the fact that your budget doesn't reflect that tells me that the chances are that you're forgetting an expense or you're not being very realistic with the targets that you are setting. If you've gone back through and you know, yes, I have all of my fixed expenses, I have accounted for my savings goals, and I have realistic variable expenses, look at where you can add some money to your savings goals, especially your sinking funds. Because chances are, if you are someone who is overdrafting your account or living paycheck to paycheck, you might not be putting enough money aside to cover those non-monthly expenses that we call sinking funds. These are things like Christmas or car repairs or home repairs if you own a home. Even though we should see these expenses coming because we know at some point, even if we don't know exactly what's going to be wrong with our car, that we are going to have to fund some car repairs, a lot of us don't think to save in advance for those. So if you have not included those in your budget, make sure that you do. If you want to know more about sinking funds, I will link my video up here about those. Once you have got your total monthly goals in line with your average income, we are moving on to step 3, which is adding your accounts inside of your budget. It might sound weird to add all of your accounts inside of your budget if you are in the negative or have no money, but this is important information for your budget to know. So make sure that you add all checking and savings accounts and credit cards even if you have no money or negative amount of money in there right now. And since we have either a negative amount or no money inside of our accounts right now, we don't have any money to give a job, so we can go ahead and move on to step 4. Step 4 is to be extremely conscious and mindful with your spending. Here at the ATB, I am typically all for making room in your budget and being realistic and spending money on the fun things. And that is still the case, but right now, if you are in this position, we are in crisis mode. And as the wonderful Glennon Doyle reminds us, crisis actually means to sift. So we need to sift away all of those unnecessary expenses and spending and just get down to being very realistic and frugal and mindful with our money. My biggest tip here is to consult your budget before spending money on anything. Since our goal is to spend as little as possible until we are in the green again, this doesn't mean that you have to stop living your life, but it does mean that you want to consult your budget before making any purchases and ask yourself if it's something that you really need to spend money on. Also, make sure to ask yourself if there is an accessible, cheaper option for you. And we will make sure to budget for all of those extras ASAP. Step 5 is to continue recording your transactions as usual. Just keep in mind, you are not failing if you are sticking to your budget. It might feel really disheartening to keep coming back to your budget even when you see a lot of red and you know that there's not a lot of money left in these categories, but keep going. I promise you it is going to pay off. The budget is your plan. We have made a plan that is going to work eventually, so you just have to keep sticking to it until you start to see those results. Keep recording all of your transactions, including any fees that come out, your bills, or any spending that you do. Then, once you get paid, we'll move on to step 6. Step 6 is tracking your paycheck. Inside of the YNAB app, this is what it looks like when you finally get paid. You're going to record your paycheck as a normal transaction, but this time it is going to be in the green because it is money that is coming in rather than money that is moving out. And whenever you record your paycheck, it's going to show up at the top and ready to assign. This means we need to start giving that money a job. Start looking at your budget, cover any of your overspending first, and if that's all you have money for, that's okay. It might not be enough to get you out of the hole just yet, but keep going. YNAB is going to continue helping you to reach your goal. Continue to repeat steps 4 through 6 of tracking all of your expenses and your paychecks until finally, for one of your paychecks, you've gotten to a point where you've made enough money to get out of the red and start assigning that money to some of your future spending. Whenever you're to the point that your paycheck is starting to cover future spending rather than spending you've already done, that is your sign that your budget is working. This might be one paycheck, it might be 10 or 20, it doesn't matter, keep going. Once you are out of the red and into the green, step number 7 is to follow the 4 rules. I talked more about YNAB's 4 rules in this video here. I love them. That is the base to how this system works. And now that you're in the green, you can follow all of these rules. So definitely check out that video to learn more. But basically what we're really focusing on here is rule number 1 out of those 4 rules, which is asking yourself, what does this money need to do for me before I get paid again? Even if it can't cover everything, what is the most important thing that that money can do for you now that you're in the green? Move that money into those categories and keep sticking with your budget and your plan. I really hope that this helped you to conceptualize how to use YNAB and how to create a budget that works for you, even if you have no money to budget right now. While I know that it can be overwhelming and disheartening to continue to see that red, future you is going to thank you if you just keep sticking to the plan and seeing it through. You deserve to be in a position where you feel financially confident and you are not worried about all of those overdraft fees and constantly wondering if you're going to be able to make ends meet and afford the next bill that you have coming out. If you have any questions, leave it for me in a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video or you learned something cool, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps boost this video to the top. That way more people can find this content. And I will see you all next time.